Hey, Power People. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. Right. Welcome back to another episode of Renewable Rides. I am extremely excited today to welcome Tony Frencham. Tony has been a friend, a mentor, a sponsor, and he was one of the most critical factors in the formation of VECKTA, and I'm sure we'll get into that throughout this conversation. But today, Tony is hanging out in Melbourne, Australia, so it's morning your time, Tony, evening our time. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Gareth and Dan. Looking forward to it.
So, Tony, we always like to start with the most important question. What are you passionate about? Either pleasure or work?
Yeah, I've seen this question on your other podcast, and I've been thinking about it. And it's true leadership is what gets me excited. I've been thinking about sport and life and work. And when I say true leadership, not we've got to go win. More the how can we be the best we can be mentally, emotionally, and when I unpack that, it generally gets back to purpose. The people who lead well and enjoy being led and are successful in life understand what their purpose is, understand how they want to go make a difference. And that actually does take me back to VECKTA at the beginning, and you were there, and we were in Worley. We worked out that distributed energy was going to be an important part of a successful energy transition. And so we wanted to be part of it. And we were trying, and we weren't being very successful. So we kept reinventing it and trying to come up with a better way to do it. And we kept bumping into people who had all been unsuccessful at it. But we kept at it because we knew that's what we wanted. We needed to make a difference. And you guys are making a difference. And that's what VECKTA, that's for how VECKTA came into being. And big ups to everybody who supported it along the way, and to all the people that are using it now, and you and the team who are living it. So,
yeah. It's been a wild ride, and I think we'll dig into that as this plays out. But in terms of that passion and purpose piece, Tony, where do you think that comes from? Because you've had a crazy kind of renewable rides journey yourself. Where did it start out? What values did you grow up with, and then how did you end up pursuing that?
Well, I was one of those kids that, every time they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't know what I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be a fireman or something, one of those crazy things. And then I was about 15, and I had a really good chemistry teacher, and I bumped into that and science, and I did a chemistry degree and went into the chemical industry. And so my scientific background is curiosity, and then getting to the facts and figures. And at the end of the day, I think when I eventually turned to the dark side, gave up the white coat and put the suit jacket on, and went on the commercial side. But really interested in what is the problem statement. And once you know the problem statement, you can go and solve anything, right? And so too many people are just walking around doing stuff and not understanding what's the big picture problem statement. And I guess my scientific background helped at that, because I sat back and looked at this 3-year degree, and I did one lecture on thermosets, epoxy resins. And then I ended up working for 4 years for the now gone Swiss company that invented epoxy resins and has the trade name Araldite or Araldite, depending on where you come from in the world. And I'm thinking back going, how can I be in this business when I only did 45 minutes on it in my degree? And the answer is the degree doesn't teach you technical stuff. It teaches you how to identify problems and then how to go about addressing the problem. So I took that right through my whole career. And, we worked together. And when we were sitting back there looking at the beginning of the energy transition, trying to figure out where does the world need help, it was where it either didn't understand what the problem was or the problem was going to need some unique solutions. And, so that's and you see that in sport. You see it in politics, you see it in life. So yeah, and that reverts back to, some people call it common sense, right? But we had this little thing when we were traveling around the world. We lived overseas for 17 years, and our kids were born there and grew up there. And we thought, one day they're going to be young adults and they'll be out of the nest, and what can we teach them? And it's only common sense, right? Because they're going to live in different shoes to what we lived in. So I'm an old style person and I read a newspaper, right? So in the morning I'd be reading the newspaper when I was home, reading the newspaper, and the kids would be having breakfast and getting ready. And somewhere in the newspaper was someone not demonstrating common sense. Mm-hmm. So I'd say, right, today's episode of Don't Grow Up to Be Stupid is, and I'd read out this thing and the kids would go, oh my God. Well, it was the best thing ever because it was a little bit of fun with the kids before they went to school. But they can now see a problem happening right in front of them. They can just walk into a room and go, nah, this doesn't feel right. There's someone being stupid here, and walk out. Mm. Great.
That should be a podcast or a newsletter that you should start, Tony. I think it'd get a lot of attention. And there's a lot of good examples of it that you can draw on every day.
Too many, unfortunately, but yeah.
I love that. I may have to adopt a version of that as I'm raising my boys. Tony, it's from what you just described there, it seems like there's a link between problem statements and purpose. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you help people, leaders, identify their purpose and define their purpose?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been fortunate to work with some great teams, and I won't say lead great teams because, I have led great teams because you get put in the leader role, right? But in the leader role, you then get everybody in the room and you go and figure out what is it we're trying to do. And most importantly, by difference, what is it we're not trying to do? Because you can't do everything. And some things you can't solve for. Once you and the leader, if the leader walks in the room and says, hey, I've solved for this, here's the answer, or here's what we need to go do, all right, off you go and do it. I don't want to work for that leader, right? So we go in the room and we do it collectively. I remember we did it over 2.5 days once for VECKTA in a rented house in north of San Diego, where we were, La Jolla, yeah. And eventually you get a common understanding of what the issue is, and you can call that then a purpose, if you like, or a common problem statement or a common objective. Now, not everyone can do that work because it's hard work. But if you bring everyone along for the ride, then everybody knows why they're doing it and what their role is. And some people very, very good at then going off and executing. But they're really passionate if they know why they're executing. And so that's what. And look, it's extra work up front. But rather than just calling in the players on the field and saying this is the play, if they understand why it's the play and what they're trying to achieve, and that there's a risk of failure. But, I really got excited this year, Gareth, because my football team won the premiership in Australia. And unfortunately, the camera's facing this way because I got the premiership posters up on the walls. But we got this really forward-looking coach. He's a bit Ange Postecoglou for those of you in the football world, and he says it's about windscreen wiper moments, and he let this out at a press conference one time, and I think he wished he didn't, but he drums into the players, look, things will go wrong and things will go right, but I want you to treat it like a bug that's hit your windscreen and it's in your way, and you put the windscreen wipers on and it's gone, and then you focus on the road again. And he said, if something goes wrong in life or on the sporting field and you internalize and you keep it in your head and you get frustrated about it, then you can't do the next thing well. So get it out of the way. We know you didn't do it on purpose, because you're a professional athlete or you're a professional leader or worker or whatever you're doing. It's the same as if you get really excited and you've kicked a miracle goal. Windscreen wiper, get on. You've got another job to do. You're now a defender against somebody else and you've now got a thing to go do. Celebrate after the game. Get a little bit excited, but I really like that because he's getting them back to the purpose, and the purpose is to be a key member of a team and do well. And when you internalize things and you get overexcited or over-frustrated, you're letting the team down. That was really and it was amazing. We weren't the best bunch of players this year by a mile, but we were the most purposeful. And that's unusual when you get a bunch of testosterone-filled men running around a sporting field where they're banging into each other, to get them in the heat of the moment to not be in the heat of the moment, to move on. And you only can do that by training. You have to train that way. You can't just say, when we train, we'll be off script, but when we play, we'll be perfect. It doesn't work that way. You have to be playing and training that way all the time. And anyway, that got me excited. And you see it in life when people are really thinking a different way. And then when they're on the screen, they're trying to be all polished up, and eventually they slip, right? And because that's not them, they're not authentic. Anyway.
It really resonates. I appreciate you sharing that.
Especially in sales for you, Dan. You can't take the no's too seriously. You can't celebrate the yeses too hard. That's a good one.
Yeah, in business and in life, frankly. I mean, raising children is not an easy task, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. And as you were sharing that, it's something I've noticed that sometimes I'll beat myself up. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? And I'm like, no, move on. I've got the North Star of raising good humans, and it's not all going to be roses.
It's the biggest job we have, and kids just soak stuff up from what they see and hear, and you have to be authentic all the time, and you have to be mindful of everything you're saying and doing, because they're just soaking it up. And you can't sit there on your screen all day and then tell them, well, you can't be on your screen because they've just been watching you, right? And so it's an interesting, it's a wonderful challenge. I wasn't ready for it when we started having kids, and but I was a better person for it afterwards.
What, a lot of people talk about wanting to travel with their careers and with work, Tony, and you and Melissa obviously went on that journey and had the kids on the road and spent a long time traveling around the world with business. Can you just describe kind of what prompted that and sort of the trials and tribulations of that process, and why you kind of did it for so long?
It wasn't a plan.
Yeah.
But after my little foray in the epoxy world, I joined Dow and to move to the dark side to become a salesperson. And great company, and I started working my way up the company in Australia. And Australia's a big country, but it's not a particularly big market. And eventually, and at the same time, Melissa was at Shell, and she was working her way up the company. And in fact, she got put up for a job in The Hague, and so I almost was the trailing spouse. And then Dow put me up for a role in Singapore for a regional role. And so we went off to Singapore, and Melissa kept working, and we had our first child, and we thought it was the normal 2 to 4 years, then we'd come back home. But we just kept moving, and we inevitably got there's this like vortex that sucks you in, and you eventually end up in head office in Michigan, and we eventually did. And then we decided, look, we wanted to get back closer to home, and so we parents getting older, and but we also every year we brought the kids back to Australia twice a year every year, which was hard work back then. But in the northern summer, we brought them back for about 6 to 8 weeks. And at Christmas, New Year, we brought them back for about 10 days. 2 kids that had air sickness problems, and the worst place we were from, when we came from Michigan to Melbourne, it was 34 hours and 4 flights on the world's worst airline, United. And well, they were then, and but we wanted to keep them grounded. We wanted to know who their family was, to know what Australia was. That was good. I'm glad we did it. Anyway, then we moved back to the Pacific, and then we had a terrific stint in the Middle East, which was outstanding, 5 years. And then very fortunately, I got tapped to come back to be the CEO of Australia New Zealand for Dow. And at just the right time, the kids were in high school, and they got to finish their high school in Australia. And so that was terrific. What do you take away from it? Well, you do have to manage your kids, right? And we were moving sometimes every 1 to 2 years. The longest we were anywhere was 5 years in Houston, 5 years in Dubai. But lots of shorter stints. We had to manage them. We also made sure we took a lot away from the culture. So when people move now, they're on the internet, right? And they're reading their local newspaper from home every day, and they're watching their local sports from home every day. And they could basically, they're just like working from home, but in another country. We didn't have the internet when we left, so we had to immerse ourselves, and we learned that that's a good thing. You learn a lot. When we eat at home, we eat like Europeans, right? It's a long meal. Everyone has a discussion. Children get the same amount of voice time as an adult if they want to talk. There's no screens on, and it's a relaxing time. We don't finish until everyone says we want to finish. We took that out of Europe. We took other things from other places. Middle East. If you've never lived in the Middle East, to know that Arab culture and to know Islam, and they're separate, it's not what you experienced in the newspaper and the press, and it's fantastic. And you end up with friends from all of those places, which is outstanding. So yeah, it was good times. Glad to be home.
Yeah, got that. Take us on the journey from chemists, epoxies, chemical world, and then the transition into energy.
Yeah, so 28 wonderful years at Dow, and I thought I had a deal to be in Australia for 4 years to get the kids through high school, and then, but for a variety of reasons, they asked me to go up to Singapore again and be president for Southeast Asia, which was a ripping role, fantastic role, but completely wrong time and wrong for the family. I tried to make it work, didn't work. So I left Dow, and very fortunately, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but very fortunately, I knew the founder and chair of Worley, and I was catching up with him with no intention of asking for a job, and he found out that I was coming available and said, come work for my company. And what I didn't realise at the time was, Worley was founded on oil and gas, and they had a chemicals business, and they had a mining business, and they had a power business. And they were they could see the energy transition coming. We weren't calling it an energy transition then, but they could see it coming. And so this was 7-8 years ago, and they wanted to grow the renewables business. So they asked me to come and run that business. And I didn't know anything about energy, but John Grell knew I knew how to do change, and I knew how to lead change. So I came in to do that. Very quickly realised I needed to go run the whole power business, so we picked up the power business. And we started to go try figuring it out. That's when I bumped into Gareth. Gareth was in our consulting business at the time in the US. We got a bunch of people together and figured out that for an engineering company, where's the money and where can we make a difference? And that wasn't solar PV. Solar PV is, put a bit of concrete in the ground, a steel pole, and you attach, a panel. There's no engineering in that. There's a little bit of consulting at the beginning, and that's about it. So we went through and we said, look, the 3 places where we could make a difference is offshore wind, which at the time was just a little bit in Europe, in shallow water, but we knew eventually it was going to be everywhere in deep water and floating, which we could borrow technology for offshore oil and gas. So, off the coast where you are, it's 700, 800 metres, and yet you've got these massive demand centres that are going to need green energy. So floating offshore wind is going to be perfect off California, if you can sort out the whales and the Navy. But green hydrogen was the second place we figured that was going to be huge and needed engineering work. And the last one was distributed energy. And we knew that microgrids and that whole world of distributed energy systems was going to be essential to moving us to a more efficient, effective system, and it will be. We weren't the only ones to figure this out. But it's turned out it's harder than we all thought. So, and hence one of the reasons we ended up developing VECKTA. So.
When you look at the energy transition today, Tony, what's exciting you most about where we're heading and what's been achieved?
Look, what excites me is when humanity gets wrapped around a purpose and starts responding, right? You look back in the most inventive times in history, unfortunately, most of them are around wars because that's when humans get a common purpose. But here we've got a common purpose built around saving the planet and restoring it to a workable balance. Fortunately, this is not our first energy transition. You've heard the story before, but it's our third in modern times. First one was when we powered the Industrial Revolution using coal. And the second one was when we powered the transportation revolution using oil, and we went with cars and planes and everything else. And look, both of those energy transitions lifted literally billions of people out of poverty, created the modern world, and was net good for humanity. But we now know there was a consequence, and the consequence was this invisible thing called carbon dioxide is over 400 parts per million and rising, and it's a big warming blanket over the earth, and we've got to get it down. Fortunately, renewable energy, which has been around for a long time, we've always had water mills and windmills and other interesting purposes, is now getting really cost effective, and we're applying great technology to achieving it. Those first, but let's be clear, humans don't do things just for the good of it. They like to make money and have successful lives. Those first two energy transitions were driven by follow the money, right? And this one is also going to be driven by follow the money as well. As much as I and a lot of people and my kids and would all like us to do it for the reasons of it's the right thing to do, it's also going to be follow the money. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act was put in place for in the US, to help people follow the money and do the right thing. The Europeans are doing the same thing. The Chinese are doing the same thing. Fortunately, solar and wind and a few other things have got really cheap now, so that's good. But that's not going to get us there. We've got more things that we've got to go do over the coming decades. It is a transition, right? It's called a transition for a reason. It won't be done by July 1st next year, right? It's going to be decades. And for the listeners on the Renewable Rides podcast, you've got to chunk it down into little small bits and figure out what it is you can do and what it is you can't do, and just go work. Don't get overwhelmed by the big picture, because the big picture is very overwhelming, and we've got a lot of overwhelming things going on in the world at the moment with wars, and we just came out of a pandemic, and this thing looks insurmountable, and it might not be resolved in our lifetimes, but let's do the things we can do and chunk away at it bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think, Tony, you mentioned before you've kind of built your career on being able to manage change and influence and innovate. And I think one of my favorite experiences with you was when you were very new in the role, and we came to pitch a business model, and the first thing we asked was for you to open your checkbook, and you didn't even have a clue who we were, let alone what you were letting yourself in for. But you embraced the challenge and supported us to open the corporate checkbook and achieve great things. Like, for the business leaders out there that are facing the insurmountable challenge, as it were, how would you encourage them to think about change and innovation and just taking those first steps?
Yeah, well, let me explain that day from my perspective. I mean, you and a few others were on a call with me when I was in Australia. It was pre-pandemic, so it was just that I was home. It was early in the morning, and I had no briefing of why I was on this call, and it was the follow-up to, we'd identified distributed energy systems as a target market, and you and your team, you were leading a consulting team, had been going after it, not very successfully. And it wasn't that you weren't working hard and you weren't all smart. It was just that the market wasn't responding because you were going out to customers and saying, hey, microgrid would be great for you, but you're going to have to pay us a few $100,000 to do a consulting gig, and we won't know if it's going to give you a good outcome until it's finished. So they had to go find money they didn't have, bet on an unknown result in a world that wasn't incentivizing people to go respond to the energy transition, and consequently wasn't working. But it wasn't just you guys, it was everybody. So you get on a call one morning and you say, you know what, we think this isn't working. We actually want to automate the front end, which does us out of a job. We're going to replace the consultants with an automated front end and take the friction out of the system and go faster and cheaper. That's great. I mean, you've identified the problem statement and you fixed it, even though by fixing it, you were effectively putting yourselves out of a job and going against the business model of the company. That's leadership. That is what we were talking about at the start, right? So how could I not say yes, even though I didn't have the money? So that's one of those moments where if, I was incredibly proud that you guys had worked out the problem and then come up with a solution. And did we know the solution was going to work? No, and the first iteration of it didn't work, and we had to keep iterating it. But that's how you lead. That's how you innovate, and that was really exciting. And great. We need more of that, right? And the world loves it when you take friction out of the system. That's how people make money. That's how the Googles and the Microsofts and everyone popped up. That's how most big companies arrive. They make things cheaper, faster, better. And that's what you guys are doing, and that's what you're doing with VECKTA, and that's great. And keep doing
it. Tony, well, building on that friction, meaning challenges, and so what do you see as one or some of the biggest challenges we have ahead of us in the energy transition?
Wow. Got a great diagram, but I don't have it on me. I'd flash it up otherwise. But some folks at one of the universities in the US did a work back a few years ago now of the US energy system. And shows all the sources of energy used in the whole of the US coming from, whether it comes from oil, gas, coal, nuclear, renewables, and then in the middle where it goes to, so homes, industry, transportation, and then at the end, how it all gets used. But the interesting thing is, and let's call the units, we'll call it percentage. There was 100% of energy going in, but at the end, there was only about a third of it being used. 2/3 was lost. And it was either lost to the fact that you turn a power plant on and you keep it running at full tilt all day, even though there's only 2 peaks in the day, and so that's lost. Or transmission losses. Or when you jump in your car and you're driving around, all that heat and noise is lost energy, friction on the road. There's a lot of ways to waste energy. So you're making 100% pretty much of emissions, but you're only using a third of the emissions for practical use. 2/3 lost. We can't get to a successful outcome in the energy transition without reversing that split. We need to be using 2/3 of the energy and only losing a third. Friction and loss of heat and noise and transmission, it's just going to happen, right? We can't get to that flip without a couple of things. Storage, we're going to have energy storage. This is all about energy efficiency, but we're really lousy at energy efficiency because we're really good at making energy cheap. When it's cheap, you're not incentivized to be efficient. Storage is important. When we make it, I'm looking out the window at the moment and it's a little cloudy, so it's not sunny, it's not windy. On a day like today, we need to be drawing energy out of storage. And then when it's bright and sunny tomorrow, which it will be, and windy, not losing any of those electrons and putting it in storage. So storage is important. Digital is really important because digital is going to help us time shift demand and time shift supply through storage. And it's going to help us trade energy. It's going to help us do all the smart things that we don't do at the moment. And we're at the very beginning of that digital journey. And VECKTA's part of that, but it's and that's a big picture thing that just is going to happen over time. And in many ways, we just have to unleash consumers to play their part in that process, because they will do the right thing, especially when the right financial incentives get in there. But yeah, it's amazing how much energy we make and don't use.
Yeah. And Tony, that's a fantastic insight. And I think something that I've always really enjoyed about interacting with you is not just the technical and the leadership side, but also the fact that you've always been a massive advocate for diversity, for inclusion, for making sure that we think about these problems and opportunities quite holistically. What are your thoughts around how we build our businesses and communities to be considering these other diverse factors?
Yeah, look, it's I'll take us back to the journey again. I mean, people think about diversity and they generally first start thinking about gender and culture and other things. Diversity of life experience is probably the way to think about it from a business perspective. Now, life experience includes those things because that's who we are. But I'll give you an example. When we got together for that 2.5 days in La Jolla, we very cleverly, I don't know whose idea this was, but we very cleverly collected up a whole bunch of different people. So we had a lot of diverse thinking. We didn't just have, the standard people who were from the power business in the room or the renewables business in the room. We had people from consulting, from, design and engineering. We have people from operations who run things from our power services type business. We had people from the digital group. We had, we had our partner that we were working with at the time there. We were in the process of merging with Jacobs' ECR division. And we had someone from Jacobs join us, even though we weren't one company at the time, just to bring all those different views.
Yep.
Probably wouldn't have got to the outcome we got to without all of those views, because when you're in a room with a whole lot of people that have had the same experience, everyone's saying and thinking the same way, right? And now, does that make the room more difficult? Yes. Does it take longer? Yes. Can you get sidetracked? Yes. But can you get to some really outstanding, innovative outcomes? Yes. And, one of the people you've already, been on this podcast, Brad Andrews, was there. And he was leading our digital business at the time. And he was on vacation. He brought the family down to go to Legoland, I think. But he came in each day to bring his different experience into the room. And that's what you got to go do. And it's and you get this, and you got to invest time in it too. So some of the really interesting thinkers are the quiet ones in the room, and you've got to bring them along and then tease it out of them. There's plenty of noisy people in the room like me, but there's other people that you've got to give them space to contribute. And so that's the diversity, that's the inclusion part of diversity and inclusion, right? And it's hard, but it's great when it works.
Yeah, I really like that, Tony. And I've really enjoyed this, learning about some of those very early pre-formation days of VECKTA. One of the things that, as part of this transition, is just attracting more talent and getting more people running after this with us, whether it be at VECKTA or just in the broad transition. What's some of your advice to either get people to think about coming this direction, or get people that may not identify themselves as being a contributor to the energy transition because they're in an operational role within a manufacturing company, but how do they affect change and contribute to this broader energy transition?
Well, look, there's a couple of things going on there. Attracting people. I've got two young adults, very happy to say, in our family, and 25 and 23. Purpose matters to them, right? They care about what sort of company they work for, what work they do, that there's a greater good there. So that's important if you want to attract people. So you have to understand your purpose. Now, it's interesting. I work for the world's second biggest chemical company, and some people have a very negative view on chemicals. Work for a big engineering company that was formed in oil and gas. People have got a negative view on that. You have to be sure that the company you're working for is great ethics, great people, and that it's continuously learning and it is making the world a better place, net. And both of them were and are. Give you an example. When I was at Worley, I was running the power business, and then Wally asked me to lead the energy transition theme for the company and to get people thinking about that. It was pretty hard to do in a company that's oil and gas heritage. But if you go on the Worley site now, you'll see their purpose is sustainability, and they're definitely everyone's on board now. Inevitably, what happened when they pivoted, they over-pivoted. And all anyone was talking about was renewables and sustainability, and this is great. And by that stage, I was running the chemicals and fuels business. And, not far down the road from where I'm standing, there's a refinery down there, and there's about 20 or 30 Worley people that turn up each day, put their high-vis vests on, their boots and their helmets, and they go to work making sure that refinery runs properly. They do the maintenance. And they were disenfranchised. And we had to circle back and say, no, listen, they have just as important a role in the energy transition as you guys do in VECKTA and people are working on offshore wind, because it's a transition. We've got to, the world has to keep working today as we change it for tomorrow. And the refinery is pumping out fuels and other things that we're using today. And if that stops, the lights go off, right? The cars don't run, the planes don't fly. Yeah. And they have a role, not only making sure that happens, but they also have a role of helping that company as they go through their energy transition, because they're trying to use less energy, have less emissions. They're going to be transitioning, or they are transitioning to sustainable aviation fuels. They've just put in a green hydrogen fueling system down there. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff, and we're helping them with it. Well, Wally's helping them with it. So you do have to explain to people what their role is. Otherwise, if you sort of go, wow, by 2050, none of these jobs will exist, they're like, oh, my God. Well, no, but that's 2050. And today, you all have a role. And in fact, what we want you to be proud of is you can help enable our existing customers to be the best they can be. And we went through big debates about coal industry, for instance. Should we just abandon all the coal companies that we work with? And the answer is, well, no, they won't go away in the short term. They'll just end up with less capable engineering companies working with them, doing less good things to help them transition. And no, that's not a good outcome for the planet, right? We're better with a seat at the table. So when they wake up and go, oh, my goodness, I need to be reducing my water usage, and I need to be reducing my emissions, and I need to be being more effective at this. And when I close this down, I need to be rehabilitating it. Going, great, that's us. Let's help you on that journey. And so it's never black and white like people would have you believe. The last two energy transitions got us to this wonderful modern life that we have. We can't just chuck that out and jump to the next one. We'd love to, but that's not a transition, right?
Yeah. Tony, on your journey, has there been a quote that's kind of really stood out for you that you live by or sort of carry with you?
Look, were you at that first session when I got this gig and we got together in Atlanta?
No.
I don't think you were. I literally had got in the role and I didn't know what I was doing, and I gathered together a bunch of people in Atlanta for a couple of days, and we wrote down everything we knew, everything we thought we knew, and everything we didn't know about renewables. And then decided what is it we need to go and either find out if we do know the right answer or go and get the answer. Two things came out of that session. They weren't mine, but I sort of stuck with them throughout. One was follow the money, because, I'd used to be in a product world, turned up in a services world, and the clients decide what work you're going to go work on because they've got the money, right? So follow the money, because we were trying to figure out where the transition was going. The second thing was learning by doing. And it's easy to go jump on the internet and say, oh, I've learned that. But no, you haven't. You've just found some information. Let's go and try. And that's what you guys did with distributed energy. You went off and tried to do a bunch of consulting work. Didn't work. It didn't work as well as we would have liked. And then you said, right, let's change the system. And we learned by doing. And then it worked a bit better, but not as good as we'd like. Change again. Learning by doing is... and the caveat to learning by doing is learning by doing, but not spending very much money. Because I came from a capital-intensive world when I was at Dow. You've got to go test the market and learn and test the product and learn and test all these things before you go build the $300 million plant, right? So you got a lot of work to do beforehand, and learning by doing.
Amen. That really resonates on so many levels. Tony, you've had a tremendous career and a purview across so many different things. I'm eager to hear your response to this question, which is, if you could be any energy technology, what would it be and why?
It's definitely energy storage, because we're not going to be short of cheap electrons as we go forward. We're going to put as many solar panels down as we can, and lots of wind and hydro, and nuclear is going to be part of it, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But energy storage is going to make us more effective and more efficient, and is going to help us get from that 1/3 used to 2/3 used. And I quickly worked out you can't store an electron. When I got into the power business, I had to get all these power people to tell me how electricity works. You can't store an electron. You have to convert it to something. So, a battery, you convert it. It's a chemical process, right? You convert a chemical, and then you convert the chemical back, and you get the electron back. But most of it is turning it to temperature, turning it to heat, and then reusing it, or turning it to gravitation, or running. There's lots of ways to do it, but you can't store an electron. You've got to convert it. And so energy storage is going to be really important for us, and that means I'd be a boring old battery or a pumped hydro scheme, or I'd be something, but or compressed air, or there's lots of them around. And there's some really clever humans. When you give them a big challenge, get very clever sometimes. And I remember when I was in the Middle East, and people were going, well, we can't do pumped hydro. And I said, actually, because, it's a desert, we don't have enough water. And I said, you just need two reservoirs. You need an upper reservoir and a lower reservoir, and you pump up, and then when you want the energy back, you run it down through a turbine. So the lower reservoir can be the sea, and the upper reservoir can be a dam, and you pump seawater up to the dam, and then you go up and down. Right? As long as you filter out the fish, it's fine. And if you go to the Red Sea side of Saudi Arabia, it's a mountain range running into the water, and there's lots of valleys, and you could just put a dam in there. And well, that wasn't my idea, by the way, but you just got to think it through. There's always a way. So,
battery storage resonates with your personality. Get charged up, get energized, release the fury, and then exert all your energy and chill out and recover and watch some Formula One. I think that's great.
And if you treat me the wrong way, I burst into flames. So.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And last official question, Tony. If you could listen to anyone on our podcast, who would it be? And what would you like to ask them?
This one's going to be a bit strange. The Prime Minister of Tuvalu. So for people who haven't heard of Tuvalu, Tuvalu. It's halfway between Australia and Hawaii. It's a group of islands, and the average height of the islands is less than 2 meters.
Mm.
It's widely acknowledged that they're going to be the first country impacted by, permanently and irreversibly impacted by, rising sea levels. So the PM of Tuvalu knows what his purpose is. He's laser focused in getting people working on the energy transition because it's existential for them. So I wouldn't have to ask him a question. You just get him on. He'll know what to tell you. So he's doing a really good job in this part of the world of getting countries with means like Australia and New Zealand and others in this part of the world focused and stopping us from kicking the can down the road about the energy transition. It's all right for you guys, but look at us.
Yeah, brings it all into perspective, doesn't it?
It does. And they have just as much right to survive the energy transition as anyone else. So, yeah,
that's great. And so, Tony, you're now board member, sort of CEO, coach, advisor. If people are excited about how you think and your experiences and want to collaborate with you or work with you, where can they find you?
They'll find me on LinkedIn. I'll be there, and I am there. I have to say, over the recent years, I've drifted away from social media, and the only social thing I'm on now, I guess, is LinkedIn. After Elon blew up Twitter, that I fell off Twitter, and the rest of it is just, it's all a bit crazy out there. But yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn, and happy to talk, happy to help people with whatever it is that they want to go do.
Awesome. Really appreciative of your time, support, friendship, and thank you for sharing a fraction of your experiences with the Renewable Rides listeners. And we'll definitely have to get you on again in the future because there's so many avenues we could have gone down.
Yeah, well, and I didn't get to ask you guys questions, so it would have been good. Yeah, Gareth and Dan, thanks very much. It was a great opportunity, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but for all of us, we're in December now, so all the best for the festive season and for Christmas and New Year, or for other listeners who are not celebrating Christmas, whatever they're celebrating, and have a great one.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Cheers.
Damn.
Gareth, what a ride.
Yeah, that was great. That was a really enjoyable conversation. What an interesting individual, and very inspiring.
Yeah, I know he's had so much experience across the world and across so many different aspects of business and leadership. And I think the thing that stood out to me most was the conversation around purpose and whether it be in, as he talked about it, business or sport, but having that purpose that is really your guiding light, your North Star, the thing that you're running after, and recognizing that the journey is a bit unknown, or the path is a bit unknown, that it's going to take some zigs and zags, and you're going to have triumphs that are awesome, and you're going to have challenges that are maybe awful, and all of those. And I love the analogy of all of those being bugs that you need to wipe away and focus on that purpose and that North Star. I think we can all get caught up in the details and caught up in the challenges and awesome things that happen day to day. But really, we need to focus on progress and moving ahead and not getting too excited or too down. That was a hands down the thing that resonated most with me. How about yourself?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Particularly, I think just the emphasis on this being an energy transition, and that we've got to be proud of where we've come from and the way that we've generated and used power in the past to build quality of life. And we need to be able to sustain that, but also transition in the process and make sure it's an equitable transition, but it's one that we certainly can't rush and make stupid knee-jerk reaction mistakes to. We have to be very purposeful. And I like his two comments around follow the money. So how do businesses enabling the energy transition follow the money, and how do businesses globally, navigate the transition in a really profitable and sustainable way, because that is a real genuine opportunity. So I think that was awesome. And then just try by doing. I think we're all doing this every day. We have to, people who are innovating and disrupting and creating new market segments have to be willing to take risks and challenge the limits and really just get after it and not make, learn from the mistakes and opportunities quickly.
Yeah, I think in the world that we live in and working with large businesses to accelerate their energy transition and deploy on-site energy, I think I relate follow the money with the pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
Businesses need to be profitable. Businesses are structured in a way that they need to make decisions about the bottom line and shareholders. Like, that's just the reality. So rather than fight the reality, let's be pragmatic about it. And the good news is there's ways for them to follow the money and get better financial outcomes by doing this. So I really like that too.
Yeah. And in the process, we need to educate each other who's making the stupid mistakes. And I really enjoyed that, finding the newspaper article and educating those around you as to why it was not the thing to be doing. I thought that was fantastic. I think for a lot of business leaders out there, I think they should look at Tony's experiences and outlook and attitude towards innovation, towards business, towards life, family, travel. Super inspiring. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, likewise. Well, look forward to a future conversation with Tony.
Yeah,
absolutely. And trying to figure out how we get the Prime Minister of Tuvalu on here. Challenge accepted.
Yeah, if anyone out there has any direct contacts. Otherwise, after it.
Well, all ears. Well, good. That was a fun one. Looking forward to the next one.
Catch you on the next one. Bye.
See ya.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.